because they want to buy it because it's blue no matter who. There's a certain percentage of our population that's going to vote Democrat no matter what.
That's
and
true.
They're pressured. There's their community, their ideology. It's
what I
left
don't
is good,
understand?
right is evil.
I don't understand why. Okay, you have a wall, or you have I built 570 miles of wall. Everyone said I built a lot of wall, exactly the stuff. But you have a border. What I don't understand is who would want people to come into our country from places unknown, like sometimes they'll say about a fighter, from parts unknown, right? Remember Haystacks Calhoun, from parts, he says from parts unknown, the old days, those are the old days. That's even before you. But who would want people to come in pouring into our country? We don't know anything about them.
But I want to ask you this. Why do you think they're doing that?
I think because
do you think they're trying to buy votes? Do you think they just want cheap labor? Like, what's the idea?
There's a couple of theories. They hate our country, they're stupid, or they want to buy votes. It's one of those three things.
Yeah.
They want it. Now, they are trying to get people registered who, don't even know what the country is.
And they're trying to give people amnesty, people that live here. They're trying to give them a path
They want
to
to give them citizenship, and they want to... Well, how about what happened?
If you think about the amount of money that they've given them when they've come here, the food stamps, the benefits that even our poor people aren't getting.
$200 billion, and that's a way low number. That's a way low. It's interesting. New York has always been like, sort of like always looking for money. They've spent $100 billion on this stuff. I don't know where and they're not getting the money from the federal government. It's crazy. And because the mayor came out and said, we can't live like this.
They investigated him.
He gets in. By the way, I called it. I said he just got himself indicted. This group is stupid, but they're vicious. They're stupid people, but they're vicious people.
The 2020 elections, you say you have all this evidence that it was rigged. Why haven't you put this evidence in a consumable form? In what?
Oh, I did. I have books on it. And by the way, books have been written on it. We have an author named Hemingway who is a great writer. She wrote a book on it, but many books have been written on it. There are books that are – what's happened is judges don't want to touch it. They would say you don't have standing. They didn't rule on the merits. They ruled – the merits never got there. The judges didn't have what it took to turn over an election.
Let's talk about the potential vulnerabilities for elections and election fraud. One of them is mail-in ballots. The other one is if someone can break into voting machines. If someone can hack voting machines. Those are two huge ones.
So
and
Elon
can be
Musk,
done?
Elon Musk, I think he said it publicly. I hope he did because I wouldn't want to be the one. But he's a really smart guy. And he's a very good guy with computers, right? You'd say he's
one of the smartest people alive.
Anybody that can land that 20-story building and perfect and boom.
While he's doing Starlink, while
he's talking
Tesla,
to me about
while he owns Twitter.
And then he agrees to Starlink.
And he tweets 100 times a day.
He's an amazing guy, right?
Yeah.
He said to me that unless you have paper ballots, it can never be an honest election. That's a big statement.
It's a big statement.
We should go to paper ballots. France did. They went to mail-in voting, and it was all messed up.
What can be
the
done?
Amazing thing with the machines? So we have the machines. They cost 10 times more. Paper ballot would cost 8%. And they make paper ballots, they're all watermarked and everything else. They're very sophisticated. But if you take a look, paper ballots, 8% the cost, and you're done by 9 o'clock in the evening, right? Now we have these sophisticated machine. It goes up to heaven. It goes all over the place and down and around. And they say, we'll need 2 weeks to figure out who the hell won the election.
Do you think that's by design?
Yeah, I do. I think it's very crooked. That's my opinion.
You're allowed to have an opinion. Let's say you win in November. What can be done to mitigate these problems? What could be done at the level that the president has power?
Well, if I win, this will be my last election. But I think I owe it to the country. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think I owe it to the country. We have to have fair elections.
So how can you fix that?
Jimmy Carter was in charge of a commission, that many years ago. And they put him and Scoop Jackson and various senators, distinguished people that were retired. And they came up with a report. And the report's primary finding was you cannot have mail-in ballots. Because if it's a mail-in ballot, I went to the voting booth the last time, whatever it was, and I walked in Palm Beach, and I walk in, and they know me. They say, Mr. President, could I see your identification? Yes, boom, here's this, here's that, everything. And then you sit and they watch you sign, and you really, there's not a lot you can do. I mean, if you wanted to be dishonest, it's sort of beautiful.
Right.
If instead of that, I'm going to send them a ballot,
Right.
it has to go through the postal services. It has to go through a lot of people. They mail you houses that, the house was demolished and the people have left, and it's so bad. The one thing with Jimmy Carter, he had a very strong commission. It was no mail-in ballots. And we're the only one that does elections this way anymore. They've gotten away from them.
And this is it ticked up in a big way after COVID. It used to be like soldiers serving overseas.
They used
people
COVID
that
to cheat.
Yeah. Well, they used COVID to certainly push this mail-in ballot. Another thing
Well, no,
that
but
they... Yes.
but they used COVID to cheat.
But here's another
And the
one.
last election was a little bit of a... You couldn't even get security guys, big, strong guys to watch. You know what? You'd call them. They'd call them, and they were afraid to go out. We were in the middle of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
We were in the middle of COVID, right smack in the middle, and they didn't want to die. They didn't want to catch it. It was like, in a way, it was like a ghost town, and the whole thing. But mail-in ballots are a bad thing.
That certainly is a problem. Mail-in ballots are a problem.
But every
Another
other country,
problem is
other
voter
countries,
ID.
Yeah, a voter ID. How
Voter
about
ID is the most bizarre argument that
Yeah.
I've never seen anybody articulate in a way that's convincing.
Because
why
they
you
wanna
don't
cheat.
need voter. Well, it doesn't make sense any other way. I've tried to straw man it, or I've tried to steel man it rather. I've tried to look at it from a position like, why would you not want people to have ID? And a lot of the ideas are
Cheat.
just ridiculous. You
Gavin
need an
Newsom.
ID to get a driver's license.
Okay, but here's now the next step. Gavin Newsom, one of the worst governors in the world, and I used to get along, but I don't get along with him now because he's just too, it's just a whole con job. But Gavin Newsom, the other day, signed a bill that you are not allowed to ask a person, even ask them whether or not they have voter ID.
Now, what could be
If
a
you ask-
charitable reason why anybody
Because they
would
wanna
want
cheat.
that? But
Because
that
they
would be
wanna
the
cheat.
only thing that makes sense.
But that's taking it to the next level.
right.
Now, you have ID. The Democrat National Convention, when they had it the last time, I saw, they had a sign like a billboard on the name of the person, where they live, how they live, who the hell their boyfriends are. Every single, it was, and a big picture. That's for they have an ID, a big ID. It was hanging like you were a prisoner. They had these massive cards, everything. And yet when it comes to the vote, in theory, the most important thing we do, okay, when you go to a grocery store, you give ID. But for a vote, it's supposed to be a sacred thing, and it should be a sacred thing. No voter ID because they want to cheat.
Well, it doesn't make sense in any other way. I've tried to look at
There's
it.
no other way.
There's no argument that anybody's presented that makes any sense why.
You know the funny thing, Joe? The Democrats, the people, they all think you should have it. In other words, you should have voter.
Yeah.
If you go to the people, Mrs. Schwartz, Mrs. Smith, Mr. and Mrs. Jones,
Sure.
they say, of course, yeah. Democrats, they say yes. It's the politicians that don't want it, like Schumer and these guys. They don't want it because they want to be able to cheat. Because you know what? If they didn't have it, okay, who is going to vote for somebody that wants open borders? Who's going to vote for somebody that wants to have men playing in women's sports? I have never had one person come up to me and say, President, you got to do something to allow men to play in women's sports. Have you ever? Just like I've never been called by a pollster. I told you my little theory on pollsters, okay? I'm getting myself in trouble with some of these things, but I don't really care. Nobody's ever come up to me and said, we want to have men play in women's sports. And, I had a funny thing. At a property I own in California, I have a woman who's a very good athlete, and she works there as a manager. And Brian Urlacher, the big Chicago Bears, great player, 10-time All-Star, I guess Hall of Famer, great guy, big, strong guy. And she said, oh, he's one of my favorite athletes. Can I have a picture? And I took a picture and I sent it. And I noticed she was the size of his leg. His leg was bigger than she was. And I put it out, should men play in women's sport? It was just so ridiculous.
What's one of the most bizarre and polarizing ideas that's promoted by the
But
left?
who wants it? Now, unless you're going to cheat in elections, you're never going to get. Nobody wants it.
Right.
I don't think anybody wants it. I've been told everything. Some people want this. I don't know of anybody that wants open borders. Nobody's ever come up to me and say, President, you got to let the world come into our country.
Right.
Now, if they won, so they have 21 million, I think it's much higher than that because you have gotaways. Gotaways where they just walk in, they walk
Right.
in. And the other thing you have is human traffickers. You have traffickers, and they traffic in women, and they're going wild now. We used to, where you have to look? The trunk of cars. Can you believe it? They put women in trunks. They'll put 3 women in a trunk. These people are savages. They're horrible. The worst people. And they're making the kind of money they make on drugs, they're almost making on trafficking now. And the thing that's made it hot is the internet. That's what, you think of it almost as an ancient thing, but it's the internet. But who would want to have these things? Who would want to have, there's so many, the transgender operations, where they're allowed to take your child when he goes to school and turn him into a male, to a female, without parental consent. Who wants this? Does anybody want this? I've never heard of anyone, and I can go into 10 different things. The only way they get them is by no voter ID. You can't have voter ID. They don't want any. They want to cheat. There's only one reason, because the voter ID is so basic. It's the most basic thing
It's
there
very
is.
basic.
Who would want this? They want it so they can cheat because their policies are no good. I'll tell you, they're very smart when it comes to that. They're very smart, although they're not smart in terms of politics in a way, because what do they have that people want? They really don't have. They give away a lot of health care, a lot of stuff. But for the most part, their policies are terrible. Their policy on military, she's running on a tax hike. She's going to raise your taxes. You got to hear this. We are going to raise your taxes. And the people clap. But who is going to win with her? All my life I grew up with politicians lower taxes. She's politicking that we are going to raise your taxes.
Well, they want to raise the idea is you want to raise the taxes to the highest earners.
I know, but
they
it really
think that
doesn't work that way.
millionaires and billionaires are not paying their fair
I know,
share.
but
She
it
wants
doesn't
to-
work that way.
Well, it's a narrative, right? And it's a narrative that appeals to people that are not doing well.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, our problems are that these rich people are not paying taxes.
Well, the problems are the rich people are going to leave, and they're going to close up their companies, and then
Right.
the other people aren't going to have jobs. That's what happens.
It does happen in other
But
countries.
the whole, because you brought it up, I'll tell you what. We just he's doing a very good job in Virginia. Glenn Youngkin. I don't know if you like him, not like him.
I don't know.
But you don't know the governor of Virginia. So we have a case where they found thousands of illegal ballots. A judge just ruled that they have to be able to vote. Just happened today. Just before I walked in here, I heard a judge just ruled that you have to keep those people in. They're illegal. They're illegal votes. Now, I think they'll be overturned at the next court. One thing I found, because I had a couple of things that they get overturned a little bit, the system. Because the system, you have to hope that the appellate judges are honest. Otherwise, we don't have a country anymore. It's very important. But the whole thing with illegal ballots, it's got to be looked at. You have to have voter ID, and you have to have additional ID. You have to have an ID that shows that you're a citizen of the country.
I agree.
They don't want that either.
I agree. One of the things that I wanted to talk to you about is the JFK files. And one of the things that you said was that if they showed you what they showed me, this was your quote, you wouldn't want people to know it either.
So I opened them up partially. I was met from good people. Good people. People that were well-meaning. Mike Pompeo was one of them. He's a good person. They called me. They said, "Sir, would rather have you not." And I did open them, but I was asked by some people not to open them. There's a Martin Luther King file too, by the way, that they'd like to see. I don't know if you know, but there is that. But JFK in particular. So they called me. A lot of good people called me. People that that you would find reasonable people. And they asked me not to do it, so I said, well, we'll close it for another time. But if I win, I'm going to open them up. I'm just going to open enough time.
Why didn't you open it up the first time, though?
Because
What
a lot
was
of
what was
times,
the hesitation, though?
Addresses, people that are still living. There are people that are affected. And there could be some national security reason that I don't have to necessarily know about. But some very good, talented people asked me not to do it. I opened it up, and then they said, would it be possible for us to do that a different day?
What? How much of
Nobody-
it did you read into?
I think it's going to be just fine to open it. Let me put it that way. I think it's fine. It's going to be time. It's a cleansing. It's really a cleansing. So I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it immediately, almost immediately upon entering office.
Well, the thing, when people look at it from the outside and you sort of imagine what could be a reason why they
Yeah.
would not release those files, it would be there's people that were implicated
That's why I'm
in
gonna
the
open.
assassination.
Yeah. Well, when there are living people, you generally tend not to want to do it. When people are still living
Living people that formerly worked for the government.
for the government and living people that were somehow involved in it, and you tend not to do that. But it's time to open them. I can't tell you whether or not they're going to find anything of interest. And I did partially open. I think I've opened 50%, but I was asked not to do it, and I thought that was a reasonable ask. But now I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it very soon. There's a lot of interest in it.
One of the things that
There's
I'm
a lot of interest in the people coming from space,
Yes.
And I know you're interested in
Oh,
that.
I'm very
too.
interested in that. How much did they tell you about that?
A lot.
Really?
Yeah.
What did they tell you? How much can you tell?
So
How's that work? Is it like super
I think
top
I
secret?
Can tell,
Tell
I think,
me.
Well, based on Hunter Biden, I can say whatever the hell I
Yes.
want, right? But no. But I interviewed a few people. It's never been my thing, I have to be honest. I have never been a believer. I have people that Area 51 or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's the number one tourist attraction in the whole country or something. Area 51 in Las Vegas. Do you know that, right?
Sure. I know what it is.
So anyway, but it's a big tourist thing. So I interviewed jet pilots that say they saw something. If you saw them, you'd love to have them as your
I've had a
son.
couple in here. Commander David Fravor.
Yeah.
I had him in, who had that sighting in 2004. Very,
Yeah.
very compelling with video
compelling.
evidence, radar evidence.
I interviewed,
Ryan Graves.
I don't believe his name, but I interviewed jet pilots that were solid people, perfect. I mean, great pilots, great everything. And they said, we saw things, sir, that were very strange. Like a round ball, but it wasn't a comet or a meteor. It was something. And it was going 4 times faster than an F-22, which is a very fast plane, And it was round, which is, in theory, a great shape. if
So
you like.
when you were talking to these people, was this something that you were compelled to have conversations
No.
about? Was this your personal interest?
A little bit. It's not a great interest for me, but it's a little interest. I get that question as much as almost any question. Do you think that we have aliens coming, flying around or whatever?
What do you think?
There's no reason not to. I mean, there's no reason not to think that Mars and all these planets don't have life, because
Well, Mars, we've had probes there and
Well,
rovers,
yeah,
and
but-
I don't think
yeah.
there's any life there.
Well, maybe it's life that we don't know, but maybe it's
maybe
a
there was
different
life
kind of
there
life.
at one point in time. This is
Yeah.
the speculation about Mars, that Mars had an atmosphere at one point in time, a long time ago, that could support life. It
Yeah.
also had large bodies of water, but we've had no evidence of even bacterial life that exists on Mars. But the
It's
universe
not
is
been a
pretty
big
vast.
thing for me. I mean, when I looked at what China did to this, they would have never done it with me, where they put the balloon up, and a lot of people thought for a little while that was
Right.
one of these things. So,
Well, that's a lot of the speculation too. That some of these drones that
Could
hover
be.
over battleships, that these are Chinese drones, and that they're not
could be.
UFOs.
They could be also.
There's some super
But
sophisticated.
I did interview, let's say, 3 or 4 guys that, and without tremendous interest, if you had them, as I said, you'd love to have them as your children. Solid, beautiful people. They said, "Sir, there's something there."
There's something there.
They've said it, yeah.
Yeah, I've talked to quite a few of
They're
them.
not
that have-
conspiracy guys.
Well, I mean, the Commander David Fravor thing in 2004 off the coast of San Diego, they clocked that thing going
Yeah.
from 50,000 feet above sea level to 50 in a second.
Yeah.
They don't know what it is.
That's tough to beat.
Yeah, they saw something in the water. It was hovering over that something that was making a disturbance in the water. They got video evidence of this thing. The 2 different fighter jets with pilots in them saw it. There's, visual evidence, photographic evidence, video evidence, radar evidence. Whatever the hell it is, it moves in a way that would turn a human being into jello if they were
Yeah.
inside of it. The G-force, no one would survive.
Oh,
so
the
what is
G-force.
that? And we don't. It doesn't have a heat signature. They don't know what their propulsion system was. But
When you fly in some of these jets, these pilots have to be in great shape.
Oh yeah, I flew with
When
the
you
Blue
talk
Angels
about-
once,
Yeah, as
Yeah, I
an
got to
example.
fly. I guess
and
it's
those
an
are older,
FA-18,
and those are older machines.
and they're crazy.
When you fly in some of these things,
Oh, my
it's
God.
amazing. Yeah, but
Yeah, I can imagine.
You got to be special.
But these things that these people are encountering are far superior to what we know of.
Yeah.
Is it possible that there's some military or government program that you weren't, that they didn't tell you about?
I think I had a great relationship with the military, basically. But I didn't like certain people. I would have gotten them out if I thought if the election was different, I would have fired all of them quickly. Most of them I did fire. Biden should have fired every military person involved with Afghanistan. He should have had a lot of firings. If you look at him, he told Israel not to do anything, and at least Israel's not going to look at a bomb the way they would have been. Think if they listened to Biden. They'd be waiting for a bomb to drop on their head right now. He's been wrong about so much. I guess you'd have to say that she's been wrong too, because she always said they made the decision together. But Israel didn't follow his advice, and I think it was a very, the Middle East is rapidly changing. There are prophets that say the world will come to an end in the Middle East. You know that, right? And we have weapons today that are so scary. When you look, I rebuilt them all. And when you look at the weapons we have today, the biggest threat we have in the world today is nuclear weapons. And we have other weapons, too, that are devastating. But the nuclear weapons, the biggest threat we have in the world today. And that's what I was talking about de-escalation with both China and Russia. I'm telling you, we were going to de-escalate. They were going to de-escalate. You got to be careful. It's a little tricky playing with them because they say we're going to do it and they don't do it maybe. But they understood the curse too. It's a curse. It's China's way behind us, but they'll catch us within 5 years.
So let's imagine. Let's say you win in November. What do you do differently, and how do you change this course that it seems we are on for World War III? How do you get us out of Ukraine? How do you stop what's going on in the Middle East? How do you put a stop to this?
Well, it's a very to me it's an easy question because I think I can do it easily, but it's a complex question in the sense that the times change, every day changes. Who's winning, who's not winning? I mean, Russia's a war machine. Whether you like it or not, it just grinds along. You speak to people like Viktor Orban, he'll tell you it's just a big, fat war machine, and that's what's happening. You look at what's happened to Ukraine. If I were there, it would have never happened.
But what could you
And
do
just
now?
think-
If you
well,
get into office in
right
January,
now-
what
right
could you do now?
Right now, you would get both of them. I know both very well. And again, I do not want to tell you, for the purpose of